Welcome to another episode of The Inquisitive Analyst. I'm your host, Marcus Udikang. It's the show where we chat with business analysts and project managers about their challenges and triumphs, their ideas, and their contribution to their field. It's inspiring, it's upbeat, but most of all, it's inquisitive. My guest today is an IT transformational leader with Canadian nonprofits. She's also a keynote speaker and diversity advocate. She is CIO of Helen Knight Consulting. Please help me welcome to today's show, Helen Knight. Welcome, Helen.
Thank you. I'm excited to have this conversation.
And it's fantastic. And thanks for joining us locally from here in Calgary. It's good to see another Calgarian on the show. So Helen, let's get down to brass tacks. So you've had a varied career. You started out as an IT analyst. Eventually, you moved into the role of an IT director. Then you became a CIO. So you're also voted Canadian Transformational Leader of 2019, and that's quite a stellar career. So inquisitive minds want to know, how did you get started in IT and why?
Sure. I was really lucky in my elementary school in Calgary in the 80s. We had a computer lab, and I learned how to program in, I think the language was Turtle, on an Apple II when I was 9 years old, and you just get hooked. I mean, it was so many lines of code. You had to bootstrap it up from the floppy disk to get it to start, but then if you got the code right, the cursor would move across the screen and maybe leave a little mark and build out an image of a house. It was just epic. So I really enjoyed having that return on investment of getting the computer to do something. And there was no mouse, there was nowhere to go on the computer. So having the cursor move around was really exciting. I stayed in the computer lab class for the whole 5 years that I was at that school. But when I went to traditional high school, I was told computers were for boys. And it was at the same time as Game Boy was coming out, and a lot of really popular advertisements were all very male centric. And I listened to people, and I stopped with computers, and I left for almost a decade. I really regret that. So in my 20s, I finally went back, did some certifications, started my IT career. I've stayed in school the whole time, recently completing my master's degree in IT strategy. So 25 years of school as well as 25 years of working. But in terms of advocacy, I spend a heck of a lot of time trying to talk to those women in high school about how important it is to stay in technology and the incredible varied careers that you can get from it.
Oh, that's incredible. I remember the Apple I and II. My mother came
Yeah.
home with it, and I was just a young kid way back
Mm-hmm.
when. Okay, so you spent many years in a leadership role. Yeah, you've been managing teams. Actually, you managed help desk analysts. You've managed teams of instructional designers, and you've also managed those multi-million-dollar and billion-dollar projects. So for you, what's the core? What is at the core of being an effective leader?
Mm. When you can find strong people, all you need to do is give them a stretch challenge and be there to remove the barriers that they aren't unable to remove because of their position or role. Maybe you're better positioned to get that out of the way, and celebrate the successes with them. I am not prescriptive about the steps to follow, but I will find exciting tasks and challenges for each person to do. I also am a really big proponent of bringing in as many students as possible, like new grads. Their positive excitement about applying their skills, it's just contagious, and everybody gets sort of more excited about it. So building a team of diverse people as possible so you can have the largest collective intelligence, respecting that it doesn't matter their position or their background, their contribution needs to be considered in building out an effective solution. And then letting them go, letting them run, making sure they know that you're there to fight the battles they can't, and you can achieve anything.
Amazing. Yeah, definitely. We have to focus on the youth. There's no doubt about that. So let's talk a bit about your role as CIO at nonprofits. What does this all encompass?
So I've been involved with nonprofits for about 6 years now in an IT leadership capacity. And what I found in the hundreds I've been involved with now is there are very, very few that have invested in technology. That's kind of our fault as donors, in that we hold them to an impossible standard of spending no more than 15% on administrative costs holding them like that for years and years and years. They never had the opportunity to do a digital transformation. So they prioritize the funding to the donation management, the financial systems, and most significantly to mission, both because they're measured by that and it changes their donations, but also because it's sectoral norm. Everybody in nonprofit is doing that. When I really do a deep dive into the technology at any of the nonprofits I've worked with, though, they're using free software that's at least 10 years old. They're using donated hardware. They have home technology daisy chained together instead of any sort of enterprise technology. And when you're interviewing the people on the front line and trying to identify the barriers to their success, it's the technology. And it's the technology to the tune of maybe they're working with a really old, we still need to use fax machines when you're doing medical work. So you're working with a really old fax machine, but it takes the RN over an hour a day fighting with that fax machine every day. Or they're using an XP machine because it's a legacy application that hasn't been containered. It's not only insecure, it's not acknowledged by Microsoft anymore. It hasn't been upgraded. It's also really, really slow. And you can calculate out the amount of time that those frontline workers who should be completely focused on mission are actually spending with technology. It's huge. It's at least 10% of payroll is spent fighting the technology. So by working with them, with the nonprofits, finding where the grants and donations for digital transformation are available, partnering with the technical companies and the community of CIOs in corporate and public work. So I have a little IT advisory committee that is amazing. I can bring solutions that are cost effective into the nonprofits and return the investment. I'll tell you one story that was really great. There was there's a volunteer department. There were 7 people. They were working full time. They were really stressed out, high turnover. They would just receive all these phone calls and try to schedule on 5 Outlook calendars and a paper calendar, 5,000 volunteers coming in and supporting the clients. It was not an effective system. It was not organized or controlled. So by implementing a client relationship management system for the volunteers, pushing the work onto the potential volunteers to register themselves, watch the onboarding videos, provide their police check, provide evidence of their expertise, schedule themselves. The volunteer department only needed to advertise positions. Within a year, it doubled the number of volunteers in that department. By doubling the number of volunteers, by reducing the staff's work by 20 hours times 7 every week, they could focus on relationship management, which increased donations the following year by $5 million. And then by doubling the staff that were doing, the volunteers that were doing the manual work, the social workers were able to really focus on the clients, and they housed 42% more people that year. By no means am I taking credit for the amazing work that the leaders of each of those departments did, but the technology was preventing that work from being done because they had less people, less money, less time. And if I can return that time to the people that are focusing on the mission, then the leaders can apply their people in the direction that they were trained for.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think technology is supposed to enhance organizations, and this is just one good example of that. Actually, talking about volunteer organizations, I volunteer with CRIAC, Calgary Regional Immigration Employment Council. I can't remember the
Nice,
name.
great.
So I'm a mentor for them, and I know that they're affiliated, kind of, I don't know officially, sort of informally, with Bow Valley College. So they do a lot of training for new immigrants who might be going to Bow Valley College and on to into the workforce. So that's good to know about nonprofits. So how can the experience, or sorry, how can the expertise of, say, business analysts and project managers make a meaningful difference to the nonprofit sector in Canada?
They're so needed. The nonprofits that I've worked with, I see them as being very understaffed, especially in the sort of business expertise area, because they are so mission focused and there's so much need out there. If anybody wanted to become really involved with a nonprofit in those 2 areas, you can reach out to your favorite one, and anything that resonates with you in your local area, and talk to them, find out where you can fit into their existing volunteer, but talk about your skill set. They'll find you a volunteer project right away. And there's unlimited potential. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit in these nonprofits where showing the expertise that you bring to the table of building out a process flow, showing how this journey of maybe manual paperwork is done, and this is how it can be optimized, and you can save 5 steps, and you can calculate out that over time, it's an extra 10,000 hours a month or a year back. It would be very, very valuable to them. So if you're in between roles, I would reach out to a nonprofit so that you can keep your resume fresh. There aren't very many employment roles within nonprofits, but I do believe that when you provide proof of your expertise, they can create those roles. They just maybe haven't been exposed to these really important jobs because they've never had the money to do them, to hire them.
I think creating the rules is definitely important. And even in the profit-oriented world, you can also create your own role if needed. So that's good to know. Okay, so what should business analysts and project managers understand to be major differences between working in nonprofits versus the for-profit businesses?
Don't use business-centered language. You need to use really human-centered language. Learn a lot about the mission and learn it's like respect for how critical that mission is and how many people that they help. Business language is pretty alienating to, with many people having been only working in nonprofit their entire lives. They have maybe a misunderstanding about business as potentially evil or not. I've encountered a few times when I talked about a business canvas or business values, people just shut down because their association with business was kind of like thinking of them as a predator, as opposed to people that have worked in business and see all the great volunteering and partnership and corporate social responsibility acts. When you're working with people in nonprofit and you're translating your skills to them, you need to learn their interests, their skills, and speak to them in their language. The other piece that I learned is when I'm providing training to people in nonprofit, it's not about video training. People that are so mission focused really like the person-to-person relationship. And so a lot of the cold business tactics that we can use of emailing out a link to the Microsoft website with a video on it, it's not going to work. You need to have someone that they know and respect in the room with them for them to feel comfortable and move their own understanding of the technology.
Right.
So it was, there were a lot of things that maybe took a little bit longer, but ended up being warmer. So it was a really good lesson in terms of maybe where business makes, has shortcuts to treating people like humans, that nonprofits are so human focused. It was really eye-opening.
Good to know. Good to know. So you've also been a professional speaker on IT transformation and diversity and inclusion. So let's talk about, or can you talk about how to better increase gender diversity within tech?
Definitely. I could talk about this for hours, so I'll try to keep it short.
Do talk.
I think that there's a lot of onus put on the diverse to increase diversity, and that's never going to cut it. So when I've been asked to speak at a women in IT panel, and there'll be a manel, 3 women in IT talking about being women in IT, but not being asked about technology, and then more men. Like the only time once an MC actually said, okay, everyone take off your IT hats. It's time to turn to listen to something completely different. Women. I was like, no, we need to find, we need to be welcome into these spaces to talk about the things that we're experts about, not just the fact that we're women in IT. So I'm working through sort of a change with that, trying to have advocates on the women in IT panel as well. We need diversity there as much as anywhere else. But I think the biggest piece is providing roles for male advocates for women in technology, finding tangible ways that men can support women more to find their voice or to be heard. The men that are limiting women from participating fully in technology are never going to listen to anything that we're saying. So we need those male advocates to call them out and to make sure that there's space for us to speak if we're experiencing that in meetings. Sometimes you can go years without experiencing it, and sometimes you're in a toxic place and it'll happen a lot. But there's a lot of responsibility on the men in the room to make sure that that the poor behavior isn't repeated. And I'm a big proponent for providing unconscious bias training. It's really eye-opening when you see, I did the unconscious bias training, and I came up as sort of masculine oriented, that I still fell onto the assuming men, even though I've been in technology for forever, and my mom's a scientist and my grandmother's a mathematician. We all have this implicit bias, and you need to be aware of it so that you can make sure that it doesn't impact you. When you're hiring for roles, you need to ask the HR department to remove the names and remove the dates so that you're really judging on the actual skills. And when you're hiring in IT roles, it's really important to not use words like guru or expert. It's rare to find a woman that's comfortable using that sort of language. It's proven that men will apply for jobs that they fit 50% of the criteria, and women will only apply for the jobs they get 100%. So only list what's necessary.
Interesting. Okay. So actually, just out of curiosity, in your career, have you seen much increase in women in tech since you started?
So the numbers have been decreasing since 1985. Prior to that, there were 25% women in IT, which was above other STEM careers. And I think that it was because we were all on the mainframe. So it was a collaborative group experience where we would work together and talk about, how to solve this problem. And as soon as we changed the technology into the personal computer, but we didn't have a lot of collaborative meetings or technology to live chat with, there was a significant decrease in women in the field. So I think that was related to the change in work. I am seeing an increase now in roles for, female participation with the expertise that they bring in technology or in the business areas. Because now that we're on the cloud, it's almost like we're on the mainframe again. It's not about the buttons that you press. It's about sitting around a table with the whiteboard and the Post-it notes and solving a problem. So I expect it to be increasing. It has been dropping since 1985, but my daughter was 2 the first time that I saw her with a picture book, and she was trying to stretch the picture. She just expected from exposure to an iPad that the book would respond in the same way. So the next generation's brains are going to be so different. I hope that there's nobody who can tell them technology is only for boys, because it's all around them. It's not gendered anymore.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the opening of that, because you give these machines to these kids and you just pick it up like that, and you got to make the technology for children to understand, and they do it. They do just that. So
absolutely. Yeah. But she brought me a teddy bear and asked me to turn it on also as a child, and I was like, it's doing its thing already. Like the expectations. Yeah. Man, we got a lot of work to do to meet their expectations.
I had my niece who was, when she was much younger, she used to use the cell phone to play her the iPad, and the battery was dying. So she said, just charge it. She knew already what to do. Yeah. It was amazing. Fascinating.
Yep. Their brains absorb it. So I really have positive hope, the way that technology is everywhere, that there won't be a gender divide in the education going forward, but we've got a lot of work to do.
Nice. Okay, so what are some key aspects of IT project management within nonprofits? What are some key aspects of it?
The biggest piece is really about stakeholder engagement. So I do have my PAP, but I think the piece that I use way more than that is my ProSci organizational change management training when I'm building out those projects. It's so much more about stakeholder engagement. I subscribe to the omelet bar principle. Even if I have to make a change, if I can at least present you with your selection of ingredients that you put in before I cook it, you'll be a little bit more engaged in what I'm selling and rolling out and providing to you after the fact. So I have to heavily rely on a lot of the stakeholder engagement steps, a lot of resistance management proactively, and a lot of very careful language and translation imbued into every step of the project management. I haven't yet seen a perfect combination of organizational change management and project management, so I still work between two lists. But those OCM practices are absolutely, you will fail if you do not follow them.
That's good. Yeah, change management definitely is a large part of that, no doubt. If anyone in the audience wants to get in touch with you, how can they do so?
I'd say LinkedIn is the best way. If we can put that somewhere around this video,
Sure.
I'd welcome. That's how I met yourself. So
Yeah,
must
indeed.
work.
Okay. All right. Fantastic. Well, thanks very much. It's been a splendid time, and you have yourself a wonderful day.
Thanks so much.
All right.
Nice to
Thank
talk to
you.
you.
You're welcome. All right. Bye for now.